everybody, welcome back to another grilling video, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. We have a fairly simple recipe that we've been wanting to do for a while, and that is to make smoked cornbread. Now I know smoked cornbread sounds a little interesting or different, but I thought it'd be kind of neat to show you how we go about taking a recipe and adapting it and testing it on the smoker before we ultimately do a video. So what you're going to see in this one is actually things that we would typically do before we ever publish a video. I thought it'd be kind of neat to show you what that is. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our smoker on about 400 degrees, and that's because that's typically the temperature that you'll bake cornbread in your oven, or corn muffins. So I'm going to get this thing fired up and we'll talk about how we go about doing this. And I have this turned on. As soon as it gets through the initial smoke setting, I'm going to increase the temperature quite a bit. I'm using hickory because I want to get a lot of smoke flavor in a short amount of time, so it's a good smoky wood to use. We're going to do this in a 10-inch cast iron skillet, and we'll do it probably 1.5 inches or so thick. That's going to be our goal. Now what we do a lot of times is we will actually just use a powdered mix to get the temperatures and the times right, and then we'll go about actually making it from scratch when we do our published video. So what you're going to see is a big old jiffy package of corn muffin mix, because it's cheap, it's inexpensive, and I can just do it. And if I have to throw one away or toss one because it didn't work out, well, so be it. It's a learning exercise. But it happens a lot quicker by using packaged mix versus the from scratch. So let me go ahead and get the ingredients. We'll get everything mixed up, and we'll get this thing fired up. We'll show you how we do smoked cornbread from a package while we uncover the methods by which we're going to use here. All right, our smoker's getting up to temperature here, and as I mentioned before, I just grabbed a packaged mix of this stuff. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can go about doing this. For muffins, for a certain size tin, usually they're done in square pans, so we sort of did the math to figure out about what we need here. I'm going to make sure I have more than enough to fill the skillet, and if we have some extra, well, we may have some, corn muffin pancakes or something like that. Now, don't be surprised if down the road you see a recipe where we're actually doing these from scratch. All right, we have our 4.5 cups here. We're going to go ahead and do 1 full cup of milk into this amount of mix, and we're going to do 3 eggs as well. All right, now I'm going to mix this up a little bit before I add the honey. I'm going to break up the yolks, and we're just going to go ahead and start to mix this. Now, I liken cornbread mix a lot to like pancake mix. You don't want to over mix it. You just want it to be good and well incorporated. Probably should have just used a spatula and not a whisk, because it's going to turn into a brick inside this whisk, but we'll get it cleaned up here in a second. Scrape this down the sides and make sure we have it good and incorporated all the way down at the bottom there. We like to have cornbread just a little bit sweet. So not a whole lot, probably under 1/4 cup for something this large. We don't want it to be terribly sweet, just a good sweetened flavor. Get that well incorporated. It's now time to go ahead and pour our batter into our pan. All right, look at all this smoke, it's wonderful. It's now time to start pouring this right into our seasoned pan. Now as we fill this up, we want to go ahead and go, I don't know, fairly close to the top, but not where it's going to overflow. Remember, this is going to rise a little bit, so we want to go, I don't know, say half the thickness of the pan. We've got a 10-inch skillet with a handle on it, and we're going to put it in and we're going to rotate it in that smoker because there's hot spots in the smoker. So we're sitting at about 385 degrees and climbing, and you can see just how much smoke is coming out of this. That's good. When we open this, I want to be really quick. I have my upper rack in here, and that's actually where we're going to be putting this. I don't want the bottom of the pan close to the firebox. That's going to, or fire pot. That's going to create some hot spots and probably crisp it up or burn it. And the other thing is, this tends to run hotter toward the back of the grill than the front. It's mainly because of these vents it has on the back. That's where the heat is escaping, so it tends to travel that direction. I'm going to turn this with the handle backward for the very first 5 minutes or so that we cook this, or 6 minutes, and then I'm going to rotate it slightly as we continue to cook it. So let's go ahead and get this in here nice and quick. You'll notice I'm going to hold it from this side because I want that handle toward the back. Woo. That's some good hickory smoke flavor right there coming out of that. This needs to cook probably for about 18 to 25 minutes. We'll just sort of test it as we go. But because of that, every 5 minutes, I'm going to rotate that thing about a quarter of a turn so we can make sure that we get good even heat all the way around that backside where it tends to cook and run a little bit hotter than the front. All right, we'll be back in 5. All right, we are about 5.5 minutes in. Let's get this thing rotated around. Again, we're going to do it nice and quick because we're going to keep the smoke in. Whew. You can see it's risen quite a bit. Wow. All right, there's quite a rise to this thing, more than I thought it was going to be. And I will say, it's not uncommon when we're doing a test recipe, we'll end up with a little bit of extra or we'll try something different. So I just fired up the Blackstone. We have this little bit extra here. We'll make one corn pancake, if you will. All right, we're at another 5 minutes or so. As you can see, we want to get this thing turned again. Look at that. That's looking pretty good, but you notice it's starting to get a little bit brown on the top, but as I moved it, it jiggled a bit. If you saw that in the video, I'll play a little replay of it right here. It tells me it's still not done on the inside. I think we're running a little bit too hot, so I'm turning it down a little bit. We'll see if that does it. And I've got this set at 350. What's interesting is we're showing on this top temperature 475. Yeah, so what I'm worried about is it's a lot hotter on that top side where everything's escaping out of this. I'm also going to open up those vents in the back. There's holes on the back of a PitBoss. I use a piece of magnetic sign that I cover it with. That's how I control the airflow in and out of that if I'm not using the chimney and the smoke chamber on the other side. So that should let it cool down just a little bit. Hopefully let us get this thing nice and cooked all the way through before we get the top too dark. And as I rotate the camera around this side, we got this guy going. Let's see what we're looking like here. Looking pretty dark on the bottom side of this, so let's get it flipped over. Looking pretty good.
Over here. Yeah, right here. Hey, do me a favor. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more like it, subscribe to the channel and click on that little bell notification so you get notified of new videos. Thanks.
Let's check that out. That looks darn good. It's hot, that's for sure. Can't go wrong with that. It looks like it's a little bit thick. There's a small layer on the inside that's still really, really moist. I like it that way. It might need to be cooked 30 seconds longer, but I was afraid if I did it any longer, it was going to get too dark on the outside. So slightly less heat, but man, oh man, good stuff. This to me is the fun part. We enjoy doing the experiments and the testing to see what it is we learn. So I'll tell you, some of the things I've already learned, right, just doing this first one of these, is one, it tastes phenomenal doing it on just the Blackstone. So I know that from a recipe perspective, that's about the right amount of honey to add. The other thing I've already learned is make sure we actually don't close the vents on the smoker side of the grill. Oftentimes I do that when I have meat going in there. I want the heat to stay concentrated on that, but I'm doing it at a much lower temperature. In this particular case, with those blocked, it increased the temperature pretty high on the top side of this, and I'm getting a little bit more browning than I would want. The other thing is, you got to do a lot of testing. So I kind of assumed we would be 18 to 22 minutes. We're right now at 25 minutes in there, and I'm using this little cake tester to see if it's coming out dry in the center. Because I put so much in, another lesson learned, I should have probably had a ½ inch less in that pan. You can see it's risen above the sides of the actual skillet. It's going to be a phenomenal piece of cornbread when it's done, but we've got to get it cooked all the way through on the inside. So I'm going to have to let this go a little bit longer and hope it doesn't get too brown on the outsides. Fun stuff though. This is the part I really enjoy. All right, we're going to go ahead and test this in the middle. Not 100% dry, but boy, right out there it is. So we're getting really, really close. But as you can see, we're getting dark on the edge here. Give it about 3 more minutes. So this has been in almost 40 minutes total, maybe 42 at this stage. And as I test it from the outer edges in, it's dry until it gets to about the center 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter. And it's still just a little tiny bit moist right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull it off, set it out here to start cooling. My hope is that the heat, the residual heat there, kind of finishes that last part up without getting it any darker on the outer edges. Yeah, this is looking nice though. So I just ran a knife along the outer edge here just to make sure it wasn't stuck around anywhere in the pan, and it's not. I can already tell this one side over here, I didn't rotate it quick enough, and it's definitely got a little bit of a burn on that outer edge. I can smell the charring just a tad bit. It's a shame too, because man, the rest of this looks absolutely phenomenal. Almost a little crust on the outside. It's exactly what I was hoping would happen. It's coming out dry in the center right now, so it definitely finished that last bit of cook there. We'll let this cool a bit. We'll take a slice out. We'll kind of check the bottom because I suspect it's going to be darker than I would want it to be, but really looks pretty good. And if I think about what I'm going to change when we do this next time, I will cook this at a lower temperature so I can cook it a little bit longer, and I'll probably make sure that I have those vents open in the beginning of this cook so that the top of the grill, the top of the smoker, isn't as hot as it was this time. This is the kind of stuff we go through before we post a video. Really fun. We try them out. We test them out. Every once in a while, they come out perfect on the first one, and all we do is repeat the exact same thing. Other times, we learn a couple of things, and when we make a video on how to smoke cornbread, we will have this down. We'll talk about how do you do it from scratch, and we'll end up doing it in the pan, probably at a lower temperature, and you'll see the final product the way we want it to be. We'll show you this one too, because look, we all make mistakes. Part of this, right? And especially if you're trying to come up with new or different ways of doing something, you got to try it out. You got to sort of get familiar with it, and mistakes happen. So I want to be honest, it's dry. It needs to definitely have been cooked a little bit less and a little bit of a lower temperature. I definitely had the temperature too high. Had I had that temperature lower, I might have been able to get that center cooked a little bit better in there. Now, is this wasted? Absolutely not. You know what this would be phenomenal with? A little bit of stew or a chili over the top of it. That would be yummy. But that part, not so much. Let's see what it tastes like. Tastes like you think it does, like burnt cornbread. Yuck. I don't like to throw a lot in the canal, but when it starts getting springtime, I do like to throw some table scraps here under the dock. As the tide's carrying it out, what ends up happening is the little fish that started nesting and feeding under the docks come out and they eat it. They get used to being right here, so when we drop a line down with some shrimp on it, we can pull 3 or 4 mangrove snapper out right away, have a nice meal. All right, so the bottom was burnt to a crisp, so I cut it off, and you ready?
Yeah.
And you don't like cornbread? Oh, then you're gonna love this. Don't breathe in, it's dry. You'll choke on it.
It tastes better than the one Mom made.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I like your mom's a lot. First of all, it was way more moist.
It's just like cake to me.
Mm-hmm.
Not really, it's the texture.
I think part of that is it's probably just that your mom made one that was thinner, and I made one thicker. I think that's why it's cakey. So you know what the purpose of this video is today? To show how we test out recipes before we actually publish the video, because it's the first time I ever tried this smoked cornbread. Mm-hmm. So like I've learned a lot of lessons. Like I would not want to instruct somebody to make this the way we just did right here, because look, it's black.
Oh.
And it's a little dry. Like it would be better if it wasn't as dry, right? Like this would be okay if we poured chili over it. You don't like chili, do you?
Mm-mm.
Stew?
That doesn't even sound like a good combination.
Cornbread and chili? Oh, it's delicious.
It's like
or
mixing,
cornbread and stew, or...
It sounds like mixing milk and...
Pepsi.
Yeah.
You know, there used to be a TV show called Laverne and Shirley, and Shirley, Laverne? One of the two of them on the show used to drink Pepsi and milk.
Ew.
I know. So, like, when I was a kid, that was a big thing. People would try it, and everybody would be like, oh, it's so good, just because they saw it on TV. And you know what it tasted like? Caca. It was gross. But those were the influencers of the day. All right, so you got any closing remark?
It's good.
Really?
I like it.
I don't know if I believe you. I got a closing remark. Don't make it the way we just did today. We're going to learn more, and we'll end up publishing a video on how to make smoked cornbread. But this is kind of what we go through when we're testing out a recipe. Learning and feeding the fish with the results.
Did you put butter in it?
I put a little bit of butter on it, yeah.
I can taste it.
Yeah.
It's not like the bitter butter, it's sweet.
Well, the cornbread is kind of sweet. I put some honey in it so it'd be sweeter.
Oh.